did, Israel would whip the hell out of them, which, as you know, is exactly what it did. In approximately one day, the actual war was over. It only lasted several more days because Israel wanted to conquer territory that belonged at that time to Jordan, namely the West Bank, and also the Golan Heights. But the actual war with Egypt was over in about, 1 to 2 days. After the war, the United Nations General Assembly met in emergency session. It was the 5th emergency session of the UN General Assembly. And actually, if you read the record, which I have, it's kind of nice to read, because Abba Eban, the Israeli representative, he had a terrifying grasp of the English language. And the Arabs, sometimes in frustration, would call him a wordologist because of his grasp of English. And the Arab delegations tried to rise to the occasion of Mr. Eban. And so all sides were quite clever in their language. The standard of the UN has gone down quite a lot. Back then, it was quite impressive. And at the UN meeting, the only country in the world of all the members of the United Nations General Assembly, the only country which said that Israel was the innocent victim of Arab aggression, the only country was Israel. No, it's true. Even the American delegate, at that time a fellow named Arthur Goldberg, even the American delegate, his position was, the official American position, was that both sides were responsible for the escalation of hostilities. But there was no government in the world, except for Israel, which claimed that Israel was the innocent victim of Arab aggression. That still leaves a second question, the legal question. Because under the law, even if you fight a war of self-defense, you do not have the right in a war of self-defense to change your country's borders. And this has been the position of leading scholars in international law long before June 1967. For those of you who know the field, Ian Brownlee, Robert Jennings, R.C. Bowick, the leading figures. I'll just quote one of them, Mr. Jennings, Robert Jennings. He said, "It would be a strange law of self-defense that permitted the defender in the course of his defense to seize and keep the resources and territory of the attacker." That's strange, that you should, in the name of self-defense, be able or have the right to appropriate the territory or resources of the country that attacked you. And that's the current position of all leading scholars and the current position of the United Nations General Assembly. After the June War, as I said, it was the meeting of the General Assembly, and the Secretary General, a very good Secretary General, he was actually the only decent Secretary General the United Nations has ever had, namely U Thant from then Burma, very decent guy. And Mr. U Thant, he said, summarizing the opinion of the General Assembly, he said, "Everyone agrees that there should be no territorial gains by military conquest." Everybody agrees. No territorial gains by military conquest. During the General Assembly debate, there was a lot of difference of opinion. Some countries said Israel has to withdraw from all the territories without any reaction or without any statements by the Arab countries. It had to be unconditional. Other countries, mostly the Latin American countries, they said, no, Israel has to withdraw, but in turn, the Arab countries have to promise that they will not attack Israel in the future and that they will recognize Israel as a member state of the United Nations. But nobody, or I should say no state, except for Israel, claimed that it had the right to keep territory. There was agreement. There has to be full withdrawal. The only debate was, does full withdrawal have to come with Arab recognition of Israel and Arab commitments not to attack Israel in the future? And that's been the position of the General Assembly. Most of you should know, for future reference, the UN Resolution 242. The General Assembly was unable to find agreement on how to resolve the conflict. So it moved in November 1967 to the Security Council. And the Security Council passed the famous UN Resolution 242. There were 15, as there are now, 15 members of the Security Council. Of those 15, 14 were on record as saying it is inadmissible to acquire territory by war. The only country which didn't say anything at the time of the 15 members of the Security Council was nationalist China, which was on the verge of being displaced by the People's Republic of China, and so they remained silent during most of the debates. But everyone else agreed, including the United States. The position of the United States was that you can only have what they called minor and mutual land swaps. That's to say, if Israel wants to keep 2% of the West Bank, then it has to give 2% of its territory to, at that time it was Jordan, now it's the Palestinians, but minor and mutual land swaps. But the minor and mutual have to end up being zero. Take 2 here, lose 2 here, and it comes to 0 because of that principle. It's inadmissible to acquire territory by war. Well, that's the history, long before, as I said, many of you were born. So let's try to bring the record up to the present, the record which concerns most of you in the room. And the record is quite clear, and any of you in this room can check it for yourselves. It's very simple in the era of internet. All you have to do is go to your computer and enter under Google the words peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine. Peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine. And if you enter those words in your Google, what will come up on the screen is the UN General Assembly record. Because every year, the UN General Assembly passes a vote on this resolution. It has the same title. It comes up around November of each year. And each year, the terms of the resolution are basically the same. So, to quote from this past year, the resolution says, "We affirm the principle